Want to win money on sports? With Underdog, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash just by picking higher or lower on your favorite player stats. Millions of fans have won billions of dollars on Underdog. Will you be next? Download the Underdog app and sign up to get a free pick with your first cash entry up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you deposit. Must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama, Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT STEP to 53342. New York, call the 24/7 HOPE line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369.
Hashtag no music, no intro. Another episode of the Saints Block Party podcast. Very different vibe. This is going to be like a somber episode of the Saints Block Party podcast. But the reason why we're doing this episode, I want to give much love and shout out to our dude, Ramon Vargas of The Guardian. If you don't know Ramon, you might have been living under a rock, but before working at The Guardian, Ramon covered the Saints for 2 years at The Advocate. And I want to give love to Ramon because I really would say that Ramon is kind of like the first person that, at least in the world of Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, social media, was the first person to bridge that conduit of media and fans on Twitter. Mm-hmm. I know that, it kind of trickled down with like Underhill and people after that, but Ramon was like the first person to like truly, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, let fans quote unquote in and truly like you let yourself be available for just plain old fans, because before you started covering the Saints, that's all you were. You were a diehard Saints fan. And so you wanted to have yourself available for diehard Saints fans. And so I think without that being who you were as a beat reporter, none of this podcast, none of this probably would have ever happened. So, to see the work that you are doing and the actual journalism, like actual journalism that you did with the article, like the journalism that you did in 2019, and then the follow-up article that you column that you did that came out on Monday. Much respect to you, man, and thanks for joining us to talk about the somber topic regarding Saints, Pelicans, executives, and Catholic Church, and we're gonna get into it. But thanks for coming up, and thanks for reaching out to us, wanting to come on.
Look, thanks for the very kind introduction. Obviously, glad to be here. Obviously, I remember the conversation that we had toward the beginning of when y'all were working together, and I just thought, I think one of the challenging is that, like, at the Guardian, and there were also some very good investigations in the Associated Press and the New York Times. I think that sometimes, like, I want to do everything I can to try to get this in front of, like Saints fans, and because it's really like and obviously it's really important. There's a huge community of clergy survivors who like boost this and share this, and obviously there's just like your like avid news consumers who kind of troll the or who like cruise around like the national media sites to kind of keep up on kind of what the latest kind of news is. But I really wanted to kind of get in front of like people who would go to the games, people who follow training camp and stuff, because I think it just provides like a more complete picture of really an institution that I think a lot of us were raised on and raised to love and raised to kind of stake our dreams on it, at some point in our past life.
No, you said that perfectly. And like you said, institutions we grew up loving and being a part of. And this kind of combines too for a lot of people like me, a lot of people in New Orleans, Catholic, grew up in the Catholic Church. New Orleans has a, strong ties with the Catholic Church. Then you got the Saints, which is like our secondary religion. And then this story combines both of them. And it's just like, it sends everybody in a frenzy, puts them in a lot of weird mindsets, trying to figure it out, trying to work it out and everything. But we're going to get to all that. Before that, though, I wanted to just kind of give you props on your book.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you.
For your book, man. Great job. Just to be honest, I didn't finish. I made it about halfway through. I'm bad with books, man. I'm bad with books. But great book. Check it out. Family Gangsters and Champions. Great book by our boy Ramon. He put it out last year?
This about 2 years ago almost, but
About 2 years ago. About the boxer Tony Canzanoris.
Yeah,
Did I say that right?
Tony Canzanoris.
Yeah, man. So go check this out. If you like into boxing and boxing history and stuff like that, I know my boy Mark. He into all that stuff.
Yeah, big time.
Man, go cop this here. Support a local guy. Took his time to write a great book.
Our man
Just want to put that on there. Published, you heard me?
It's like this whole topic is it hits near and dear. It should hit near and dear to everyone. It's hard. I think for me it hits a little more near and dear because like literally I laugh not because it's funny, but like this is literally what I do and it's what I've been doing for like 9 years of my career. Right. Like, I deal in child abuse and I put a tweet out on Monday in jest, but like it really wasn't in jest. Like it literally like was like I was gone for a week. We went to the Senior Bowl. We were there. We covered the Senior Bowl. But to cover the Senior Bowl, I had to take a week off work. And it's hard for me to take time off work because if I'm not at work, that means I have to figure out, okay, I got to make sure all my kids are seen. And it's also a thing like, okay, if I'm not at work for a week, praying there's no emergencies, praying everything's okay with my kids, nothing blows up. And it's just different. It's not like working a retail job. I come back to work this Monday. I come back to like 150 emails. And in those emails, tangentially in some type of way, they all deal with child abuse, whether it's physical abuse, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's sexual abuse. Like this is what my job is. I'm a children's social worker. I deal with child abuse and have been dealing with child abuse for 9+ years of my life. And I love it. And it's a career of mine because I love helping kids and I love helping people. In just that juxtaposition, right? I come to work and it's like 150 emails and it's like touching of like, all right, let me catch up on these emails. Let me see what I got to do to try to help these kids. And it just seems like that was almost the 180 of what was going on by some of the executive in the Saints building. But I want to start with just the question of, because I'm glad we're having this podcast because in 2025, here's something that's very important. People don't read. Okay. People do not read. The article that you wrote was amazing. It was very in-depth. It was very detailed. And I know that like that was like came from the heart and you worked your ass off writing that. But I also know like the demographic people, they're like, I'm not, how many words is this? I'm not reading it. Right. So I'm glad that we're having an audio/video version that like people can maybe consume it in a different way that they're able to digest the information. The first question I'll ask, because I know this is a question that many people have, is like, why is this being brought up again, right? We already know this information. This already came out in 2019. What's the point of even bringing this information up again? We already know that the Saints were tangentially involved in the executives and the emails, and we know that so I just want to start. I know the answer, and Ryan knows the answer, but just for the listeners or viewers or whoever maybe that has that question, why is this such a monumental story of why this is a bigger thing than it was in 2019 when it was originally reported?
Yeah, so I'll be as brief as possible. I think that the short answer is, and you used a word just now that I think is important because you read into the story, obviously, and kind of, I feel like you're putting yourself into the mindset of like 2019, right? Well, we were already told that the Saints were tangentially involved, and really the difference is that this is the first time that media outlets were able to, who've been covering, and it's reporters really that, two of the reporters that had the first stories were, we used to work as local reporters, right? You got Jim Mushing at the Associated Press as Laplace guy, right? I am, grew up in Metairie, have a home in Kenner, I work for The Guardian, obviously UK, New Orleans office, but still, I mean, it's disingenuous to say like these are kind of like national, international reporters, right? I mean, we're, like I said, really Jim's as Laplace as it gets if you meet him, and I've Adam, you were at my old house in Kenner, right? So, I
Yep.
mean, you know that I'm from around here. So, and Ryan, I believe I dropped you off at your folks' house after a
Yep.
Saints one time. So, and so I think that what we learned, I think that there were some journalists who've been following this and have very deep ties to this community were able to access that it was the first time to get a look at the emails, right? And in 2019 we knew that they existed, and we knew that once, and then there were competing interpretations of them, right? You had one side, the clergy abuse survivors and their attorneys were saying that it showed, that the emails kind of like detailed this closely coordinated campaign between Saints and Pelicans executives, including the vice president of communications, Greg Bensel, including the owner, Gail Benson, and that they were, in essence, it's complicated, but in essence, kind of like running this campaign to soften media coverage around the management of the clergy abuse scandal in the Archdiocese of New Orleans, which is led by one of Gail Benson's most dear, close personal friends, the Archbishop of New Orleans, Gregory Aymond, right? And then we also knew that that the Saints were like, all we did was like you said, tangentially, we're involved in this. We're doing PR. We're doing just, we're helping distribute a list. We're helping set up interviews. We told the Archbishop to be transparent. And we only did it for, leading up to this release of a list in November 2nd, 2018, coincidentally, the day after the founding day of the New Orleans Saints, right? All Saints Day that year. I think it was the 52nd anniversary. The day after the 52nd anniversary, this of the Saints being founded, the Archdiocese releases a list of priests and deacons who had ties to New Orleans, mostly worked in New Orleans, but maybe were ordained here and then moved on, and who faced credible allegations, substantial allegations of child sexual abuse, right? And it's a range, right? It can be it all modes, and the Saints' position was basically like we helped the church a little bit leading up to that list, and really it was just to handle pending media attention, and then they fight those emails from coming out, but make those representations, right? And then so really this was the time. This time, what happened is people who pursue the story for years were able to access the emails and show that there was one side that was accurately portraying those emails, and then you had another side that left out quite a bit. And that is really the short answer. And I knew that it's difficult, right? Because it's like when you look at all the different outlets, because these investigations came out, and within a close time of each other, but they were done independently, and they were done, in parallel, and you see everyone try to address that point, right? Well, we kind of heard about these, and that's where that works, right? The efforts to keep that out of the public and to fight, like that was sort of like, I think also part of the strategy is like, if this ever gets out, like a lot of people, you'll be able to be like, this is old, like nothing changed.
Out of mind.
Old news,
yep.
Yeah. This is, and now why is it coming out now? Like why? And so obviously I think that what changed, and so it is a struggle to get people to understand that, like, no, like, there was like spin out there, and there were arguments out there about what the list said, about what the email said, and now this is what they actually said, right? And yeah, I mean, I think that, like, if you look at some of the coverage of, another question, if I can just preemptively get to, like, why now? Like, why? How come all these outlets, like, why do it the week of the Super Bowl? Well, I think that probably the only reason that Roger Goodell, the NFL commissioner, yesterday, even, he gave that kind of very difficult to kind of fathom answer, right? Very difficult to kind of follow answer, but he addressed it, right? I mean, he addressed it, and the only hope that was ever going to happen, I think, was to do it when you knew that he was going to be in the same room as one of the people that was going to be, implicated. I don't want to say implicated, excuse me, but one of the people that is, who is sending and receiving a lot of these emails that kind of outline this
tangentially involved.
Yeah, and so, obviously their proximity, does that influence like how harsh of a answer he can give if asked about it. It's difficult to say. I don't want to read minds,
Right.
but I am pretty confident that when you force the National Football League to see this when they're all in the city, and yeah, I mean, I think that like there's to the extent that like people are to the extent that there's any sort of like that there's like some nefariousness going on that's like meant to like embarrass and to embarrass the city and like whatnot. No, I think it's to make it so that like this very serious issue is like I think you used another phrase, out of sight, out of mind, that this is not out of sight, out of mind, because
Right.
it is when all the eyes of the world are on the National Football League in the city where this happened. So.
One
Right.
quick one, and I'll let Ryan go. What was the federal judge's reasoning, and ruling of why he or she, I don't know, decided to release those emails?
So that's exactly it, right? And I've got to look. I've got. It's late enough in the day that I don't mind. That I don't mind saying this, right? Because the story, I think, when a lot of people are going to be hearing this, so on Wednesday, February the 5th of 2025, is a little preview of the story that I have coming. Um, the Saints came out very strongly and said
Mm-hmm.
that.
Your other statement. We'll get to
Yeah,
that towards the end of the pod.
the Saints very strongly came out and said that there was that there was a violation of a protective order, right? And that this came out, and so to be clear, right? Nobody said that these emails were unsealed and to be released. That said, you can look in every courthouse in America, and you can look at every courthouse in New Orleans. There is not a single ruling that says that those were confidential either, right? There was a big fight in 2019, 2020 that was one side that was like, these should be confidential, right? One of the reasons was that they should stay confidential because we don't want the identities of victims to be out there and exposed and people to bother them. I went through 770 pages of those emails, okay? I went through 770 from top to bottom. The victims are collectively mentioned. No one, there's no victim, by the way, identified just in those pages, right? And the victims as a concept collectively are mentioned one time. And I didn't report this, I didn't put it in there. The one time that I can remember, and it's basically and every now and then, like in some of the letters, it's like, the line, our heart goes out to them and, we stand with them and things like that. But as far as like, there's one, and it was a question, to be fair, like it was a question that I sent asking for comment on a new lawsuit, a new clergy abuse lawsuit that had been filed. And there's a discussion, and it's been reported before. So there was a discussion about should we say the if I recall correctly, there was a discussion about like, should we say that we support victims' rights to like pursue damages for their abuse, and then the reply was like, we don't want to encourage people to sue us, right? It was basically what it come down to, and that's sort of like to give you the tone of what the victim. So that's a long way to say that there was no victims in there, right? That's one of the justifications.
Yeah, right.
That said, to just very briefly kind of go through, in 2020, there was as before the ruling could be decided about whether these confidential should stay confidential, they shouldn't. COVID-19 arrives and the court shut down, right? And then for indefinitely at the time, and during that shutdown, the Archdiocese of New Orleans filed for bankruptcy, and that made it even more impossible for this issue to ever be litigated, right? That said, the Saints have come out very strongly and said that this information was, leaked against in defiance of a court order. Tomorrow we are going to explore the competing narrative, right? A lot of it has been the Saints say one thing and clergy abuse survivors and their attorneys say another. A clergy abuse survivor's attorney who detected the existence of these emails through a lawsuit and a subpoena in that lawsuit. You will see, if you go to theguardian.com tomorrow, you'll see the competing theory that in fact these were exposed, these were not sealed, and the Saints have their answer to that. And
it just makes me so mad of like, what do child molestation victims have to lie about? Like, what do they have to gain? Like, and I know like the narrative be like, oh, they have money to gain, and like, but like it like as a social worker, like I'm getting like infuriated because it's like they've already been victims enough,
Mhm.
and they're being re-victimized during like the whole process. It's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. Sorry, it's
And
making my
but
blood boil.
the irony of it is, and we'll get to the Saints statement later, but how they constantly go back to, look, we urge the Archbishop and the Archdiocese to be completely transparent. Be completely transparent. When the Saints aren't being completely transparent, they're trying to block the release of these emails, obviously. So where's the transparency now? Like, and now you send out a
Hmm.
response saying these were leaked against the court order. What happened to transparency?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, that's a fair point. The thing that I would also say that I think that the reason that this is so serious, right, is that that list that they were sort of like helping try to control the narrative around, right?
Hmm.
It came out to
Hmm.
be, I mean, I'm just going to go through some numbers, right? The initial version was 57. I've spent years, along with my colleague David Hammer and other colleagues of mine, I've spent years reporting on who was on the list, why were they on the list. Other people come forward and say, well, my abuser, and many people come forward and say, we share an abuser, and that abuser isn't on the list. And the church, paid us some money and then didn't believe us. And then, or I'm sorry, paid us some money and said they believed us, but then, like, our abuser isn't on the list. So, we're confused here. And then you ask some questions about that, and okay, like they'll add, that person was added, that priest was added to the list, and then that deacon was added to the list. So, after a series of additions, right, the church's own kind of curated list is up to 79 who are credibly accused. And so that goes from 57 to 79. That's that's a jump. And then they file for bank. Then that list creates so many lawsuits, right? And prompts so many lawsuits because of who was included that people had never realized. A lot of people saw that list and were like, "Wait, like I've never told anybody that he abused me, so clearly somebody else did. So now I'm going to come forward and I'm going to, so you
Oh,
see, like it's like I never
yeah.
so I'm not alone, like and then I'm gonna report it and then uh and okay, so that creates like more complaints. So the church is like strategically is like we just have to file for bankruptcy because like these are we have a what bankruptcy allows you to do is it sets a date and we know that past this day we can face no more new lawsuits, right? And generally we can face no more new lawsuits and then in theory like we bunch them all together and we'll try to like kind of like settle them as like a package, right? Okay. Then the bankruptcy process begins and the bankruptcy process elicits up to the it's we've been using the figure more than 500 truly because there's like a hard deadline and then there's like kind of like a late deadline and various ones, but so between 500 and 600 claims of abuse, right? um Implicating about three at least 300 priests, at least 300, right? And keep in mind it's let's see, 300 priests, 79 that the church considers to be credibly accused, right? That's not most. And Adam, I mean, you know the stats, right? It's like how many, the numbers that most don't get reported,
Recorded. Like
and
that's
so
that's not
yeah.
even remotely probably. I would I would guess that's probably not even 5 or 10% of the actual abuse that probably actually took place.
So do you see like where like you're starting? Hopefully, like you're starting to kind of see the picture of like okay, so now like the Saints in the NFL, I'm sorry, the Saints and the Pelicans and emails that contain the NFL and NBA logos, right? It's two of the most powerful in sports, and um, are trying to spin this list as like this is like a courageous step. This is a transparency coming close, and then so I think that document doesn't age well. Like that document doesn't age well, and then when you go back to when it was kind of being planned and released, right? The emails show that like the Saints are leveraging their relationships in the media, local media, um, to try to like elicit coverage, like, hey, like highlight how courageous this is, highlight like this is the right thing, this is a difficult step, but like this is they're doing it as transparently as possible. But I mean, it's just given how much it's expanded, and that's just their curated list, right? It's grown by how that many names, and then that the bankruptcy has so many more, and yet they continue to be like, well, I mean, the implication is that if they're not on the credibly accused list, then most of these priests, you don't believe the victims. Like, you can say you stand with them, and you can say, but like,
But you don't believe them.
Right.
that gap does not. And this is, this is like informed by reporting. This is conversations with experts, advocates, survivors themselves, you know, people.
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to cut you off, but can I ask you who is deciding that who's on this list is credible or not? Like who's making?
The fact is that the Archdiocese curates that, right? The Archdiocese curates that. And look, if I can look, I know that we're kind of going like kind of off, but I think that I really want to take this opportunity to. All right, so, and he has, and the Archbishop has advisors, right? Like the Archbishop has like advisors who tell him like, hey, there's like a case, they present it, everyone kind of weighs in and says, all right, like this fits the criteria. In our opinion, we advise you to disclose him publicly, put him on the list, and then, whatever happens, right? So I have documented about a half dozen times, right? There's a story at The Guardian that in 2023, a half dozen times that that kind of recommendation was made. This person fits the credibly accused criteria. Unilaterally, the Archbishop overruled it, right? Like unilaterally overruled it. And then the statement is really like, hey, like we can't really talk about these matters, but there's more to the story than you understand. We can't talk about it, but just like you just don't get it. And that's. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, quite a bit, but that's. I think it is a fair paraphrase. And so again, like you start seeing like the issue with the document is that it wasn't initially it was like, and they did, to be fair, it was like, this will, we will be adding names, right? We will be adding names and but then sometimes they would add names and sometimes they wouldn't. And then really it's like, once you get a better idea of the true depth and the well containing these allegations, it's like, well, I mean, I can tell you that like at the time, I think that like there was no indication that there were, 300 priests who would be accused and deacons who would be accused. And once you have the stats on like, how many are not substantiated, consider, when you look at statistics of how many allegations of that nature aren't substantiated, which is different, by the way, than obviously being disproven, right? These
very
are
different.
That can't be substantiated.
Yep. Very different.
The phrase, it doesn't math, like it doesn't math. And,
it just means it can't be proven. Doesn't mean that the abuse didn't happen. It just means it can't be proven.
And you're right. And so hopefully like what I'm trying to do is give you the idea of like why it is that it is a problem that the Saints and really the emails show that like the Saints sort of like, and there's been conflicting statements now about like, the emails show that like the people who make the overtures are like the Saints. The Saints see like the Greg Bensel sees a story that he doesn't like and basically tells Gail Benson to tell her friend Greg Amon, the Archbishop, hey, like if he wants to talk crisis communications, I'm here, right? Since then, there's been a lot of like, well, that federal judge, Jay Zaney, who is also very devout Catholic, well, he kind of suggested that we link up. For that, there would have been a very tight window where that had to have happened for it to be consistent with the emails, is what I'll say. It's possible, but it's a very, very limited window if things go the way that they go. And then I think you've also seen I think the Archbishop's been like, well, I asked for help. The emails don't show that, right? I mean, if like you've asked for help, then kind of going and being like, hey, like I want to help him, and then your boss kind of tells you, oh yeah, I'll pass on the word. I mean, that doesn't really seem to support the idea that there's already been a request made, right? So anyway, so I'm just kind of putting all that out there, and so that's where I think the question becomes of like, so why bring I mean, the Saints have that year, which is so crazy, right? Like it's like when this begins, like the Saints are on the run to the NFC title game, right? It's the no call game, it's the no call season, so they're on the middle of the run to that. They're 8 years removed from authoring one of the most the highlights of the city's history with winning the Super Bowl championship 5 years after Hurricane Katrina. I think that like that's where like the questions become. It's like, why bring your all the cachet that you built into this orbit and leverage it for this purpose, right? I mean, and And that's all I'm trying to do is just kind of like explain that.
And I think, and here's what's, and I know this because I just know fandom. There are gonna be people who like listen to this, and I try not to be the type of person in regards to tell people what to do regarding their fandom. Like people will be fans however you want to be fans, right? But there are gonna be people that listen to this and just gonna be like, all right, man, well, that sucks. Like, they're bad people, but like, wake me up next week and let me know when like Kellen Moore is like the head coach, right?
Yeah.
And that's not and I know, and I'm not saying that specifically for the Saints. That's not like a New Orleans Saints problem. Right. That's a pro sports problem, right? And it's crazy. It's not crazy because if you think about it, this happened. We're talking 2019, right? Give or take
2018, 2019. Yeah.
Okay, 2018, 2019. Fast forward. 2020. When did Sean Payton step down? 2020, 22?
One.
22,
yeah.
22. They're like the favorite to land a serial sexual abuser until the Browns step in. And I told Ryan, I said, bro, if they land Deshaun, like, bro, I can't have a Saints podcast anymore. Can't do it. Won't do it. I don't know what we're talking about. I know we have a business. We'll figure it out. But like that was my but something I think with this story that's going to be crucial, and one thing I fear is that the timing of it is I already see it being kind of lost of when it got released, but being the Super Bowl, because it feels like it feels like it's being seen like as a footnote of it being Super Bowl week. But the onus is going to be on the media. Maybe not ESPN. It should be ESPN. It should be NFL Network. But like NFL Network's not going to run with the story. Like they want to protect the shield. They don't want anything to do with this. The onus really needs to be on the local media to really take this story and run with this story of how important it is. And that's something that I really have taken, me and Ryan have taken time is like, listen, we owe it. Like, yes, we're a Saints podcast, and unfortunately, regardless, like we're Saints fans, no matter the shit that the team, but it's our responsibility as a Saints podcast to talk about the important shit. Even if it's just us in this bubble, if it was just us, like, being out there adamantly against Deshaun Watson, then who gives two shits? It's just us out there being adamantly out there against the Saints training for Deshaun Watson. Because this is life. Football is ultimately that. It is a fucking game. These are lives that are monumentally impacted forever. And I might get a little emotional talking about this because no one has seen, well, maybe not no one, but not many people have seen the impact that trauma has had on a child's life than me. And the fact that it always comes back to this, people in positions of power. If we want to just want to put a bow on it, right? We have people in a religious position of power, people in a business of a $1 billion corporation, which is a position of power, and people abusing that power. And it's regardless if it's a saint, you see it all throughout the world, but people abusing their power and abusing innocent victims. The onus is on the local media. And I get how it's you have to walk carefully, because one of the things that it said in the article is that the Saints, the way we're talking about this story, let's kind of like mold it a little bit. We got to talk about it a little differently, or else, because it's that seesaw in terms of like, you got to navigate of like, if you don't do what they say, like maybe you lose access, maybe you lose but like what's more and because it's delicate because you're dealing with like a livelihood. Like I'm a media company or whatever. Like I need to have this access because I need to provide for my family. But what can't be lost here is that these are innocent lives that have forever been fucking impacted. And I'm having a real fucking conversation right now because this is the shit I deal with every fucking day. I got into the work that I do. I go into the office satisfied, and I come home satisfied because I am making an impact in someone's life. Period. For the better. Seeing a child come from a place of being completely broken, and even if it's just a minuscule, tiny, minute little, if I'm in their life for 9 months, a year, a couple of years, by the end of that journey, if I'm able to have impacted their lives for a positive and change them and put them on a path where they're home with their parents and they're in a good place and their parents are in a good place in their lives where they can take care of them. They're with a relative that's going to adopt them, whether they're in a foster home that's going to adopt them. Their lives, for me, and for them has changed for the better. And for me, I take a little solace knowing that I have improved that child's life for the better. And the fact that the Saints and the Pelicans executive tangentially was a part of this is utterly sickening. And I really need the local media really has to be vocal about this. It can't just be our podcast, and we'll use our voice and as much as we can. But I just don't want this to get lost in the noise, because I can already see it next week. You know, the Super Bowl's on Sunday. Monday comes, they hire Kellen Moore. All you're going to see for the next week, Kellen Moore, his coaching staff, all this goes away, and we can't let this go away. Sorry, I went on a tangent.
All good. I mean, I think that, again, I think, look, it's important to note that two of the stories, it's been interesting, right? Because, two of the stories that sort of pressure the church into releasing the first version of that credibly accused list, right, were they were stories done by the New Orleans Advocate, which I was working at the time. I did one of them, right? And then the other one was by Jim Mushin from the Associated Press, right? So in a sense, like, I guess that's the point that I kind of like want to make here, that, like, yes, like, I think a lot of the places that picked it up will refer to the Associated Press, will refer to the Guardian, right? David Hammer at WWL TV,
Yep.
Louisiana, right? Ben Franklin guy, New Orleans guy. Local reporters are all over this, right? I think that, and then we did see some other local outlets pick it up. It was interesting to see the editorial decision for the New York Times, right? Who had one of the stories, Jenny Francis,
Right.
And she had also covered this for Sports Illustrated in 2020.
Yep.
New York Times had it on the front page. The Times-Picayune Advocate, now One, had it on the Metro section. It was something to notice, right? They kind of had it inside the paper, not on the front.
Yeah.
I'm not saying anything other than it was in there, which I think is good. I thought that the placement was something that, I mean, obviously generated some discussion from people who were following that. So I mean, there are local reporters that are on it. I think that there will be an effort, right? And look, I mean, it's easy because I'm not responsible for the everyday in New Orleans, right? Like, there's
Right.
100 stories that I missed preparing this, right? And if you're like the daily paper, it's like you have to cover what's happening every day. So I mean, it is a challenge, and I mean, yeah, certainly. I mean, I know I'll do my best, and everyone who kind of had stories on that is trying to follow up on it. And like I certainly understand that like being like a local outlet is like a blessing and a curse in some sense, right? In the sense that you kind of sometimes you're very well positioned to lead something, and then other times it's given just like it can be it's difficult to make decisions as to what to prioritize, and so yeah, I mean, but I think it's important. I mean, look, anyone who wants to talk about the story, I'm doing it because I'm certainly trying to get this in front of as many eyeballs as I can.
No, bro, because you've done a ridiculous amount of work on this whole story, not even including the Saints, but just the whole, the clergy scandal in general. And for me, man, it's like I really feel as a Saints fan, Gail Benson really needs to do more than release a statement written by some outside PR firm or whatever. Like, she needs to get on whatever news channel she owns. The same transparency that Greg Benzel apparently called for from the Archdiocese, she needs that because I'm hearing from plenty of Saints fans in my mentions on Twitter saying I can't be a Saints fan no more. I can't be a part of this. I don't want to support this. This is disgusting because it's disgusting.
Talk about it, bro.
No, people don't even want to. We probably barely get downloads on this episode because people don't want to hear about this stuff. It's gross. It's disgusting, and it infuriates people. It brings like the worst emotion. I don't like talking about it because it's like one of the worst things ever. And for the Saints to just kind of willy nilly be like, "Oh, look, we just try to help him out with the PR, the communication side," and la la la. It was a good friend of mine. It's my friend, the Archbishop. It's like the Archbishop of the New Orleans Catholic Church. Like, he's one of the most powerful people in the state. Gail Benson is one of the most powerful people in the state, and we're talking about children that were abused by priests and deacons, people in leadership that are looked to for safety, people you go to for safety, people you go to for love and trust. And that trust was annihilated. And the Saints are adjacent to this. No, they didn't do anything illegal. No, they didn't do anything, you could say, people say like they were a part of the scheme. No, they weren't. But for them to be associated with this, I need more from Gail Benson. I need more from the Saints. I think Saints fans need more, like, just transparency, honesty. Just be real. This is what you do. You wanted to help your friend out. You wanted to help your buddy out. Somebody that's powerful in Louisiana. Greg Benzel got to go. Like, why are you still employed by the Saints? Even though, people could say, he was doing it for Gail Benson's favor, or was he doing it on his own favor, or did a judge ask him to do it? I don't know. But just seeing him as, like, on the top of the list, we got Gail Benson, Dennis Lucia, and Greg Benzel, just seeing that name right there grosses me out.
Public
relations. The public relations executive is a part of one of the worst PR disasters ever. Not mention the moral disaster, like just the moral stance of this whole thing. And look, you don't have to comment on all that because I know you're a journalist and you're not trying to call for people's jobs and stuff like that. But as a fan, that's just what I'm doing.
I want to just April Cage in the chat, who's been a supporter of ours. April just said, "I'm done being a fan of this team." I'm so sad to say that. Like, this is bigger than football.
Look, it's a reaction I've heard. I think that some of the, another reaction, and let me pull up the, one of the stories that we did today was really just kind of focused on, obviously one was the NFL, what Roger Goodell said, which was that, that the Saints are, quote, great corporate citizens, and, hailed Gail Benson's transparency, and,
as you look for that, I want to comment on, or just say what April said again in this chat, in the chat, when I think it's very important.
Sure.
What they did, speaking to the Saints, is a huge reason why victims don't come forward.
So she's hitting at a point that's exactly the quote that I was about to pull up. It was from Alex Payton, who and just to give you a little bit of his background, he is his brother was sexually molested by a priest of the Diocese of Lafayette, Louisiana, and then his father made national headlines after he was excommunicated from the Catholic Church by the bishop of that diocese, after he resigned as a deacon over Alex's brother's abuse, right? And so he said, imagine trying to fight justice against your abuser, and on the other side is a Catholic church and an NFL football team. And it really kind of like shows that it's like, and it show
What are
like
we doing?
this is like what you're up against if if you're trying to hold like your church to
Oh,
account, right? And then another statement, the so and his mother, right, has, and so to be clear, he helps run an organization called Tent Makers, which is a among the people that they advocate for are clergy abuse survivors, and his mother also is executive director, and she is also involved with Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests, or SNAP. And when powerful institutions get together to hide something, the weak and vulnerable are inevitably the ones who are harmed. And so, like, those are, I think, some of the reactions that I think kind of hit at some of the things that you said. It's important to point. I mean, the huge power disparity here, and look, it's a difficult story to report. If I can just kind of get this point, it's difficult stories. Look, I mean, my high school, my alma mater is it also makes an appearance in the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
The two before I came to the Guardian, there were two newspapers that I worked at, both in New Orleans. Both are in the story as well, and are part of the story as well. So super difficult, right? And then it's no secret. I've talked about it. I'm not going to hide it. Huge Saints fan, like growing up, right? Not the most knowledgeable, probably very emotional. um, but yeah, I mean, Saints and the Super Bowl, right? One of the happiest years of my life. I'm not gonna hide that. And then I went to go cover them, and sort of kind of took off my fan hat and try to be as objective as possible, and done that. So no, I mean it's a difficult thing. Obviously, it does not compare to what some of the people that are really truly at the center of the story. And look, I mean, if I can, one more victim that I'd like to kind of give a voice to here is so at my Jesuit, we know that's the Jesuit high school, about
Yep.
2005 grad. That's where I went, and I one of the stories I wrote in 2018 before this list came out was of a man by the name of Richard Winman, who was, when he was a boy in the 1970s, was abused as a child by a priest and a janitor at the school. Okay,
Yep.
so in 2012 he comes forward. The school pays him to $450,000 to quietly settle out of court, and then that, in response to the media coverage, like, so I wrote that story, and then in response to the coverage that kind of generated, um, you know, Greg Bensel, who also happens to be an alum of Jesuit, reaches out to the president of the school and says, speaking from personal experience, after 23 years with the Saints, when the media and the public attack you at your core, it takes the resolve of people like yourself to lead us to clarity. The church needs leaders like you, and I just wanted to reach out and say, please listen closely. I just wanted to reach out and say you have the support of myself, Dennis Lasha, the Saints and Pelicans president, who is also a Jesuit alum, and Gail and Mrs. Benson, right? So the owner of the team, right? He's like, we've got your back. If I can offer any counsel on any issue, I am here for you. And so, as Mr. Winman, right, as Winman, who sees this, I mean, it's the first time that he is like, whoa, like the Saints are like, I don't want to speak for him. I don't recall him ever telling me that, like, the most powerful, is like, what can we do for you, right? And I get it. I get that the leadership of Jesuit at the time isn't the ones that were in charge when he was abused, and I get that
Yeah.
there's like kind of having to do that. I get that. But obviously, I mean, Richard describes kind of just seeing his story appear in these emails. It was disturbing. Let's see if I can find that quote that Greg Bensel proactively offered for free assistance to help the Jesuit president. His name at the time, the president at the time's name is Christopher Franck. So that Greg Bensel proactively offered for free assistance to help Franck with his own scandal is just devastating. It's very, very hard to read. And I can certainly understand that reaction, right? And I get it.
Yeah.
I get all the mitigating thing. I want to be as fair as possible. It's like, I
That's
get
what
that.
But that's what I don't get, man. Like
how are you putting yourself in that position at all?
At all.
Yeah, I mean, and I get it. It's like, well, I get, and look,
I don't like Ramon. Like I'm sorry, bro. No, bro.
I just want to say,
I
like,
don't.
I get some insight. I get some insight into like I think that the Jesuit president is like, well, like I wasn't here when that happened, and like I'm just kind of trying. I'm doing my best to kind of deal with this, but I can also see from like the side of if you were most directly affected by the scandal in the way that Richard Winman was, right? To see like, well, they didn't reach out to me, like they reached out to the institution, like and so like I understand that position too. Like I understand that position. I understand that.
Oh man, I feel so bad for you, President of Jesuit. Like I feel so bad. Like what?
Yeah.
Like talking about children that were abused. Yes, they're not children now. A lot of them have gotten older. This happened in the 70s, and
no,
it doesn't matter, man. It's like it's crazy to me. It's crazy.
I understand like the position of like, well, like I don't think anyone's saying that like he felt entitled to that help, but it's also like, man, where like I was struggling too, like at that time, and so I think that those voices too are like as important and to keep at the center of this.
Yeah.
So,
we're gonna take a quick break at the end of or when we come back from break. We're going to listen or gonna go through briefly the Saints' response to it, get Ramon's take, anything that he will point out some things, get his response to their statement, wrap things up on this somber but very important episode of Saints Block Party Podcast. We will be back after the break.
Underdog is the best place to cash in on all your takes this football season. Which players are going off? Which ones are cold? Make your entries in just a few taps and turn your sport opinions into real money. Wide receiver hurt? Every dog deserves a second chance. And with Underdog Rescues, you can get your money back and receive a promo if any early injury causes your entry to lose.
I love Underdog Fantasy. Underdog is the best place to play champions. So sign up and deposit now using promo code BLOCKPARTY to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Download the app today and use the code BLOCKPARTY to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Again, download the app today and use the code BLOCKPARTY to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Will Derek Carr throw for over 75 yards, higher or lower? You decide using Underdog Fantasy.
Download the app today and use code BLOCKPARTY to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. That's code BLOCKPARTY to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Higher or lower, you make the call on Underdog. Must be 18 years or older, 19 or older in Alabama, Nebraska, 19 or older in Colorado for some games, 21 or older in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP. That's 1-800-639-8783 or text Next Step to 53342. In New York, call 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369.
Hair thinning can happen for so many reasons. Whether it's stress or hormones or anything, at Nutrafol we've learned that real change starts below the surface. Our hair growth supplements take a whole body approach and target the key root causes of hair thinning, so you can see visibly thicker, stronger hair in 3 to 6 months.
Hair growth starts from the inside at Nutrafol.com. That's Nutrafol.com.
Okay, we are back. One thing before we get into the Saints statement that I just wanted to ask Ramon, what was it about this story that, like, what was it that just you worked so hard, so diligently. You wanted to see it through. Like, what was it about this story that just kept you so gripped and gravitated towards it that you wanted to see it through all the way? And it's not done, right? But what is it
Are you
about
talking about
this
the emails, or are you talking about like this,
Mhm.
the emails in particular?
Yeah, or just yeah.
I mean, look, I think that obviously, like, one of the things that always jumps out at me, right, is like when you've got we know we know that there is an answer, right, and we've got two
Mhm.
competing, people like there is that we know that the truth is gettable, right, and we got two people that have their interpretations of the truth, and then there are efforts that kind of like try to stand between you and the truth, right? I think that like if this is going to be like your profession, right, like in um i if you don't have like the impulse to be like, I want to see like what's behind this thing standing between me and the truth,
Mhm.
and see who is telling
Mhm.
the truth. Yeah, I think that like if you're going to be in this profession, you have
Yes,
that
sir.
drive, and if you don't, I think that it's probably a fair thing to question whether you should be or want to be in the profession. But I mean, that's basically it, right? I think that
Mhm.
one of the things that drives is just that, like, okay, like both sides can't be telling the truth, and I want to see
Right.
who is, and
Yeah.
so I mean, another thing is that I don't always get to everything, and it's one of the things that provides me the most guilt in my life is just that like there's some stories that like you just run out of time to do. But I'm this one was definitely one of those ones that like no matter how long it took me, I was gonna try to find out, and once I did, I was gonna just give like a full account as best I could.
So someone said it in the chat. Jack Hunter in the chat said, I brushed it off. I brushed it off from earlier reports, and I'm guessing Jack is talking about the reports from maybe 2019, but probably because the Saints did damage control. Shit is real sad. Yeah. And then April in the chat said, this is why bad things always happen to the Saints. And everyone in the chat is saying karma. Yeah, karma. You reap what you sow. This I'm asking this a little in jest, but just a little bit. You were shaking a lot of trees with some very powerful people in New Orleans. Are you worried at all?
I've gotten that a lot, especially this week. I we still live in America, right? We still don't really have like the culture of of I mean, in other countries, like it's a real thing, right?
Yeah.
We're still it's a crazy time, but no, I mean, look, I think that like I hope. I mean, here's the thing, right? That like I was. Let me give you a little peek into it, right? Like the Jesuit story that I did in 2018, I told you about Richard Windman, right? It was
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like, I mean, that was hard. Like that was difficult. Like it hurt. Like it hurt to have to do that, right? But I felt like it was the right thing to do. So it was like I think that like the story in the hands of someone. Like I mean, look, there there's pictures of me in like a Saints helmet and like a Saints jersey, like when I was like 6 out there, right? There's one of the framed pictures in my parents' house is my sister and I. It's a picture that they took when Reggie Bush scored like the his first touchdown. I think it was a punt return against the in '06, right? And then the way life works out, right? He's like there was in 9 years after that, he's on Twitter publicly threatening to sue me and a colleague of mine over like it's like these. I think that like certainly like you don't relish like having to like there is no like I'm not like sitting here being like I'm sticking it to them just because I'm like a
Yeah.
sadistic
Yeah.
asshole, like it's like this is the truth, and obviously like look, I know there's implications. I am sure that like I mean sure I've made the joke about like I not that I get invited to many Christmas parties. I think maybe I will be invited to even less after that story. I get that. I get having the reaction of just like But no, I mean, it's a difficult story to write. I don't, holding people over like a barrel, such as it is, it isn't. But I mean, I'm 100% confident that like the way I wrote that story is true. I'm 100% positive it's the closest that we can get to the truth as it is. I think that at least it was in the hands of somebody that it hurt to have to kind of like show these ugly truths about some of these institutions that were like super important to that journalist, and that's not always the case, right? I mean, I can certainly say that there are some people that love making people like look bad, and it's kind of like where we're going, and it's not really like what you're the people who like motivate you to like do that. Is just that like, look, there were people that were picked on as victims. There were people that were picked on as targets because they're predators. Like the people that preyed on them saw like they're not going to be able to stand up to me. I can do this to them, and I think I can get away with it because they are not as strong as me, and they don't have people that protect them, and so they're easy for me to go on. And then this really is about standing up for them, and sometimes that brings me into conflict with people that like. Sometimes it brings you into conflict with powerful people and influential people and people who lead organizations that meant a lot to you in your life. So,
anything you want to ask Ramon, Ryan, or before we get to the same statement?
No. I mean, look, bro, like Ramon is official. I remember I tweeted something about BG the rapper, getting locked up, and Ramon was like, you could tell he has that journalistic brain because he saw the tweet and he was like, "Wait, what's that about, Ryan?" He hit me up in the DMs, and I told him about it, and he did his investigative thing, wrote a whole story about BG getting arrested and the federal court like is impeding on his First Amendment rights and all kind of stuff. The story that went viral, like all the hip hop blogs picked it up and all that stuff. And I was like, man, dude, he official,
and not that as a journalist you wanna reveal your sources, but I am confident saying that like Ryan has provided me with tips to about a half dozen viral stories throughout the once every other year, Ryan.
Every night, bro.
Viral stories. I'm like, wow. Very good news judgment, Ryan.
Jake and Bayou in the chat said Ramon needs to be at the next meetup that we do.
Hell yeah!
Man.
Oh man, it's hard to think about a meetup right now, honestly, bro.
Really?
Oh shit, God, bro. So I'm going to share the Saints statement. I'm going to make it full screen, so I'm not going to be seeing anything in the chat. It's a 3-page statement. Obviously, the Saints knew that this story was dropping because the first thing I noticed when it came out, I think it came out yesterday, was that the date of the statement was February 1st. The story came out on Monday, which was the 3rd. So they had this prepped. Like the PR was prepped because they knew that this was dropping. I pick up on things like that because I'm a social worker. I deal with legal documents, court documents.
I can have some insight. I don't mean to cut you off. I can have some insight into the. I mean, obviously on Friday, January, I guess the 31st, it would be, right? It had to be.
Yeah.
He was that's when this people who were reported on the story on our end received requests for comment, right? So gave them Friday, gave them the weekend. It's requested Saturday, but obviously to give yourself enough time to incorporate it as completely as possible. And then in case people needed more time, they had Sunday too, but everything kind of came in on Saturday and then probably spent Sunday kind of incorporating all that. And then, story went on Monday.
What are the things maybe that you specifically want to point to that like caught your eye in terms of like maybe what is contradicting what you reported on that you maybe want to speak to?
Sure. I mean, look, there's a couple things. I think that one of the impressions that were given in 2019, again, just to reiterate this, was that like we really were talking to the Archdiocese in the lead up to the release of the list, right? And then in that statement, very subtly, you'll see, I think that they put it like there was over a series of months in 2018 and 2019, right? Which in other words is a year, right? A series of months over, is a year, right? But it's like over a series of months in 2018, 2019, we had discussions with the Archdiocese about the topic of clergy abuse. That's a bit of a change, right? Because the emails now, like that is relatively consistent with the emails, right? But at first it was in the lead up to the list, which is in November of 2018. But now we're talking about a series of months. Well, we know that the overture from the Saints to kind of help the Archdiocese was made in July of 2018. We know that the emails didn't really stop until July of. I'm sorry. So the overtures in July 2018. The emails stopped in July 2019, right? So that's a series of months from 2018 to 2019, sure. And the topic of clergy abuse, for the most part, that is supported in the emails, right? There are some discussions that, there's at the request of the Archdiocese, Gail Benson and her staff write a op-ed kind of fawning over the Archbishop and some of the programs that the Archdiocese leads. And, you'll see the names of certain all-pro players, and the emails really show the way that, like, these all-pro Saints names were kind of used in association with some of the programs to be like, well, these two players in particular work with this program, with this food bank, and this other pro player has this like program that I've also like worked with and stuff. You can kind of see how that's kind of crafted, but that's certainly not the topic of clergy abuse, right? That's just sort of like, hey, friend, can you write a nice letter about me to the newspaper,
right?
As I'm in the middle of trying to navigate our way out of like this existential threat of a crisis that we're facing. That certainly, now the new statement sort of addresses like very carefully worded, but like, okay, well, we talked for a series of months over 2018, 2019. So just to be clear that there is like a subtle shift, and from what it was, right? The other thing that I'd like to point out is just I think that we've kind of like discussed how, just much longer it went, really, because I think that now we're allowing for the possibility that it went into 19, right? Initially it was just the list, 2018, very, very tight window,
right?
And now it's gone on. So that's one of the things that immediately jumped out. The other thing is a very strong statement you'll see like an attempt to sort of like shift. If you go to the bottom, you see something about like this was released, and it's to try to make it like nefarious, that this was sort of held until the Super Bowl to embarrass the city.
Yeah.
And
it is unfortunate that the media has used the occasion of the Super Bowl week to exploit the disclosure and violation of court order. I think we talked about earlier on the podcast that maybe there's no active court order, right? Regarding,
I mean, there's going to be a tomorrow. There's competing theories on that, just like there were about these emails, right? And what the email said. So there's competing theories about whether these were in fact under a protective order or whether they were exposed. And so we'll explore that tomorrow.
Of leaked emails for the purpose of misconstruing a well-intended effort. The team and the entire city are committed to hosting the greatest Super Bowl week in game ever.
So a couple of things, not that I'm trying to be defensive about it, because I 100% stand behind, I 100% stand behind that, the investigations and then the summaries of the investigation, sort of the cast of characters that we have at The Guardian. Like, we don't misconstrue anything, right? I'm not gonna, whether it was well intended, I don't have enough information about whether it was well intended or it was malevolent or whatever. I didn't misconstrue what happened.
Talk about it.
The thing that I'd like to address is this idea that it's a lot of documents, 770 pages, and then you want to give them enough time to comment, and you want to do it's 300 emails that you're trying to kind of like decipher what they mean, what are the bigger things. There's a lot of comment. No, I mean, would it have made a lot of sense to sort of time our investigation to come out during the holidays when everyone's traveling, not paying attention? Probably not.
Who cares? The fact that they're complaining about when the story's coming out is like,
you are missing the whole fucking point. You're missing the point.
It's been kind of, look, that's a lot of people, and a lot of people that I've sort of addressed that point with have had that same reaction of like, dude, who cares? You'll see. I mean, there's been, some of the people that covered the stories, right, were made a point that made it a point to kind of point out that like all these investigations dropped around the same time at 6 a.m, and like it was like a pre-dawn hit,
Oh, it
but
was
like
like a coordinated attack.
yeah, but is the point to know that like the National Football League's commissioner is going to be confronted about this and kind of get his thoughts because he didn't really
Mhm.
get an answer before. Like, I don't think that there's anything nefarious about that, and I don't think
No.
that there's anything unethical. And I think that a lot of journalists and professors would agree with me, and journalists themselves
I
do agree
mean,
with me.
do they rather it come out like on a Friday evening, in May? You know
Yeah,
what I'm
But
saying? Like, what?
and also like the here's it's the hypocrisy to me. You're
yeah,
you're like trying to talk about it's like oh I can't believe you're dropping this article during Super Bowl week when like you're involved tangentially with a child molestation scandal. Like who cares when the
Yeah.
article and
Thank you.
investigation drops? Like what are you even talking about? Like
and this is a fact. I'm not making an opinion. I'm not. This is a fact. This isn't a comment or anything. I mean, the emails very clearly contain, right, an organization like the organization issuing that statement in the emails is telling people you can't publish your interviews and you can't publish like stories on the list before a certain time, right? So this idea that like the thing that they're sort of addressing is that clearly this stuff was put under an embargo and then it was like released at a time to get maximum attention, right? That's what they're kind of getting at.
got
But
it.
then all over the emails, right? All over the emails is stuff that's embargoed and provided in advance on the condition that you don't go before a certain time or whatnot. But no, I mean, would it have made sense to like publish this as one, like it's a lot of information to go through. It's very deeply reported. There's a lot of
It
people you got
is.
to reach out to. Does it make sense to do it as quickly as possible and come? No. Like, does it to give yourself a long runway? Yes. If you're going to give yourself that long runway, do we, doing it on, I mean, over the holidays, doing it over when people aren't really paying attention, or do you do it at a time when people are paying maximum attention and
Right.
you know that people who can do something about it now, whether they choose to do it or not, but whether people who can do something and tell you, we have no problem with it, or we prefer that our email servers not necessarily be used for this specific topic, whatever it may be. That person is going to be paying, that person is going to be in front of a lot of people, that a
Right.
lot of people are going to be able in a position to ask that person to say that. No, so I mean that's just to kind of explain that. That's like what jumped out, where like there was like sort of an attempt to shift the conversation to,
Station.
did this get
Right.
out the right way? Is there
Yeah.
something like nefarious about the time that this was dropped?
I want to ask you this. The bolded statement right
Yep.
there, where they say,
Read that whole paragraph, bro.
regarding the list of credibly accused clergy published by the Archdiocese in November 2018, no Saints employee had any responsibility of adding or removing any names from the list or any supplemental list.
Yeah,
Is that a gray area, or is that true, or is that false? Like,
same. Let me take the same approach, right? Like this isn't an opinion. This isn't like I'm not trying to. There is no hidden meaning behind what I'm about to say, right? This is just a fact. One person in this entire thing said that that something quote allowed us to take certain people off the list. Like I never made the accusation that they did it. No one ever accused them. There's one person, and it was in an email from Greg Bensel, the vice president of communications for the Saints, with the Pelicans and Saints president Dennis Lasha, right? So it's an email from Bensel to Lasha, and I'm going to read you. Okay, so keep in mind, CC is very common abbreviation for conference call. W is very common abbreviation for with, right? So this is what the email says. Had a CCW Leon Canizero that allowed us to take certain people off the list. The list will get updated, and that is our message that we will not stop today. Okay. Obviously, you see that, and it's like, what does this mean? Like, it's, it was the, obviously every outlet, I think, that got these emails zeroed in on that, right? Because it begs investigation.
For people that don't know, Leon Canizero,
I'm sorry, he was
he was the district attorney for New
correct.
Orleans at the time. Now he's over the Louisiana
He's at the state attorney
office.
general's office.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
right.
Yeah. So basically, he's saying that, hey, we had a call with the district attorney at the time, and that let us take certain people off the list. Now, because we asked, right? Because we asked and confronted, like, what does this mean? Uh, we learned that, well, the position now is that, like, well, what he's conveying there is that he had knowledge of a conversation that took place between someone at the Archdiocese and so the Archdiocese and the DA's office, right? And the DA, right? So the DA, so Greg Bensel knows of a conversation that the DA had with someone at the Archdiocese. Another piece of evidence that we have is that we know that there was a handwritten, a typed message that was left for the DA around those days that was like, hey, the Archbishop is trying to get a hold of you. He wants to follow up on a conversation he had with you, right? That message was left for him 4 days before the list came out, and this conference call that seems to have taken place on November the 1st, right? 52nd anniversary of the Saints founding, by the way, day before the list comes out. So right around then, right, it's like, hey, Archbishop, like, hey, DA, the Archbishop's trying to talk to you. So what the statement ended up sort of like revealing, right, which is still odd, I think, like as a journalist, as somebody that's like, this is unusual, like this isn't usual what you would expect, is that there was clearly a conversation between the DA's office. I'm confident that happened, right? And the Archdiocese, whether it was the Archbishop or not, we know the Archbishop wanted to talk to him, but whether it was those two men, I'm working on that. And they're ostensibly talking about the list that's about to come out, right? And then at some point he finds out about it. And he's briefed on it clearly, right? So the vice president of communications for the NFL team in New Orleans and the NBA team in New Orleans finds out about this conversation, and then kind of communicates with like a colleague of his what his impression is, right? And I'm not saying like just he seems to be like passing on the impression that he had a CCW, Leon Canizero, the DA, that allowed us to take certain people off the list. The use of the first person plural there, us, like us.
Yeah.
Like, you work for the Archdiocese, you work for the Saints. Like, what's happening here?
Yeah, what is that us? Is the us the Saints?
Right.
Is the us
Yeah.
our brotherhood of Catholics? And what is it? Like what?
Right. And I mean, all we have is that, and then we have their statement, which is like he was passing on his impressions of a third. But in the meantime, also like apparently finding out about this call that presumably probably was not meant to see, but that was probably meant to kind of be kept in like a circle, right? A tight circle. Yeah, I mean, I think that all that just kind of creates questions. But then, look, I hate to kind of take this approach, but it's like you kind of see this email, you ask them about it, like, hey, like, what's the story here? And I mean, it comes off as like, yeah, I mean, that's all it is. It's just like, well, tell us. And so to be clear, like nobody said like that they had a role in like doing that. It's just like, does this mean that you had a role in taking names or putting names on the list or whatnot? And I mean, the answer is no. But in the meantime, we learn about, I mean, I hate to keep on reiterating this, but like, I think that this really illustrates like how layered this all is. It's just that there's an archbishop and there's a prosecutor, the top prosecutor in the Archbishop city, talking to each other about a list that they're about to put out, and then the top spokesperson for that city's football team finds out about it and is kind of like, it lets us take certain people off the list. And so really it's just a matter of like, hey, give us the rest of the story here, and that's what we got.
I don't know, man. That's my team, though. I guess.
I wore the shirt for this occasion. I don't.
Yeah.
I guess. First and foremost, man. Thank you for your diligent hard work. Thank you for reaching out to me. Monday night wanting to come on, because this is important. And I don't say this with hyperbole. This is by far the most important podcast episode we've done in 5 years. And I mean that sincerely and truly. No matter, the number of views, that doesn't matter to me. Like, this is the most important episode that we've done in 5 years, because me and Ryan know this, and I'm sure you know this too, as paranoid as Sean Payton was when he was head coach. We know that when this episode drops, or maybe they might be listening to it right now, but we know that once it is going to be listened to by everyone in the Saints organization. Everyone in the Saints organization will 100% listen to this episode. But we're not recording it because of that. We're recording it because, one, we wanted to get your story out there in a medium that, for people that don't read in 2025 and don't read long form articles and columns anymore. But it's out. We wanted to get it out there too, because your work was so diligent out there for the victims. And put the spotlight on it, because it's gonna, me and Ryan's supposed to do this prospect of the week episode this week and talk about Will Johnson, and it's just gonna be hard to switch that on and just talk about football again, man. Like, it's tough. It's gonna be really, 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 really tough. Wayne said, thank you, Ramon. And thank you, fellas, for speaking on this. As a black man, I thank you. No, you're all good, Wayne. Dante said, y'all, please, if you can retweet, like, share, quote tweet, whatever this episode, the Saints need to feel some heat. Absolutely.
Please.
But no, Ramon, brother, you're like a brother to me. You're always welcome to come to the meetups and everything. But thank you for coming on and sharing this story, because it is a very important story. We appreciate you coming on, brother.
Thanks for having me. Like I said, it was very important to me and I look, I don't want to get too political. The presidential election obviously taught me to rethink, I think, a lot of the ways that you try to get your work in front of people and reach people. And I appreciate you guys helping me. Whether there's a big crossover between your listeners and the Guardian, I guess it remains to be seen. But it's still kind of letting me. It was important. Look, I know I can see the numbers, and we reached a lot of people, right? But
that's great, bro.
What I wanted to do is I know that y'all are watching the games on the TV, and I know that y'all are the ones that are in the stadium, and I know that y'all are the ones. And I just thought it was important. I'm not going to tell anyone I'm never going to tell anyone don't stop supporting the team, or how can you do that? No, I want. I'm never gonna do that. And people, I understand both reactions. I understand I'm no matter what, my team is my team, and I'll live or die with them. I get that, but I wanted to just I think it's a good thing to fully understand the world, right, as much as possible. And so what I really appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to kind of have this kind of in-depth conversation with your listeners, which is obviously difficult to get on some of the some of the more standard outlets where time is very tight, and answers and things like that. So I really appreciate y'all giving me all this time.
One quick thing, because I think this is kind of an important question. Where is your fandom? After covering all this, and I know it's where is your fandom right now as a Saints fan with everything?
It's been, man, when I was covering, obviously following everything that they did, when I was working it, right? Before then, I couldn't imagine, if, no plans on Sundays and Mondays. I think I've just reached a different point, right? It's a couple of things. I think that, just being a parent and just, you've got a family, you're raising a family. And so it can be, things just change, right? I can't say I've followed the season all that closely. I think that forget all this, right? Your relationship with the NFL kind of fundamentally changes after, the no call happens right in front of you in the stadium, and you're so shocked that it happened, and then it sinks in all these years later. you kind of like, I can't, that was like a day where I'm like, I think we spoke a little bit about it, and then, it was like, I can't really let myself get that
Exactly.
worked up
And
about like,
we talked about it for years, bro. You got to emotionally
uh,
detach.
yeah, you like reach a point. So I think it's just like a changing thing. Obviously, I mean, it's difficult, man. Like, I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and say that like I think this work. I hate to give you like a long answer, but like, certainly some of the organizations that like I've written about that I had a history with before, aren't always thrilled, and very often, understandably, I mean, I guess aren't always thrilled about some of the stuff that like I've reported, and certainly I've been accused of. I think that there's probably some people out there. I mean, I look, some of my classmates at Jesuit who are, I know, like pious Catholics and big Saints fans and devoted Catholics were like, thank you for that story. I know it was
Hmm.
difficult, like very proud of you. And I wasn't expecting that, right? Especially because like our high school and our team, in like in speaking ours, like New Orleans, right? Like the high school that I went to, and then the
Yeah.
team
Yeah.
that plays for my city, like it, it they've certainly had finer moments, I think, and then I think it means a lot when like people who they're like their lives intersect like with those
Yeah.
organizations are like, great job, I'm proud of you. I think that's like I like that reaction. I also understand the ones that are like, you stabbing the city in the back, and I mean, I get the to cope, you like kind of shoot the messenger, such as it is, but yeah, I mean, it's difficult, but so I mean, I think I'm overall, I think, in a healthier place. You know,
Good, man.
I'm in a healthier place when it comes to. There was a time in my life where, man, if the Saints won, I was gonna have a great week.
Yep.
Bro,
If the Saints, that my
been there,
week
done
was
that.
gonna be awful. So
I'm good.
not there
Been there, done
anymore.
that.
That's what I can say.
Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
This
you, bro.
was amazing. We appreciate you coming on.
Yeah,
Anytime you want to come on, you just have to reach out and ask. We will make sure that it happens. We
I
appreciate you. We
appreciate
love
it.
you. We will wrap up. We will be back. We'll be back this week. We're gonna record our prospect of the week episode.
Prospect of the week.
Yay. Will Johnson. Yay. Episode. We appreciate y'all. We love y'all. We know this is a very difficult episode, but it was an important episode, and so we'll keep talking about the Saints as we always do. I think it's important for me and Ryan to continue to do this podcast and talk about the Saints, because regardless of anything, one of the things, as I quickly wrap this up, one of the things that us not getting credentialed by the Saints was one of the best things that ever happened for us, because we can always be authentically us and keep things honest and real. And I think in times like these, especially, it is needed the absolute most. And to have that like independent voice that's not tied to anyone. Like the Saints we don't have credentials for the Saints, and we can be authentically who we are. And in situations like this, it's just it's needed for us to be able to have our own voice of what we feel and speaking on what is right. So we appreciate y'all. We love y'all. We'll be back this week. Prospect of the Week episode for Patreon only later this week. With that, we're out.
So.
Peace.
Why choose a Sleep Number smart bed?
Can I make my side softer?
Can I make my side firmer?
Can we sleep cooler?
Sleep Number does that. Cools up to 8 times faster and lets you choose your ideal comfort on either side. Your Sleep Number setting. And now save 50% on the new Sleep Number limited edition smart bed. Plus free home delivery when you add a base. Ends Monday. Exclusively at a Sleep Number store near you. Learn more at sleepnumber.com.